Today, we're joined with Bill Himmelstein, founder and CEO of Tenant Advisory Group. Bill is a commercial real estate expert with over 20 years of experience representing tenants and buyers, helping them maximize leverage in lease and purchasing negotiations. He's known for consistently delivering measurable financial impact, often saving clients tens of thousands per employee or over 20% on acquisitions, while building a powerful network that supports business growth beyond the transaction. Recognized as one of Chicago's most influential commercial real estate brokers, Bill brings a strategic, operation level perspective to navigating complex deals and market dynamics. Bill, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Boy, you make it sound like I'm doing some good things, so I appreciate that.
Well, we should, like, for everyone else that hasn't learned or met you yet, you got some fancy looking photos that back that up of amazing things.
Well, I've
Um,
been at this for a long time. I know people will say, "No, that guy looks to be way too young," but no, I've been doing this for 26 years now, and I love what I do. I love working with businesses to help them find solutions where their real estate can support the growth of their business as opposed to the other way around. So, yeah, I love what I do, my friend.
well, tell me, how did you get into the business?
Just a series of bad choices and mistakes, really.
Hear
Uh,
that a lot in
no,
this industry.
no, it was, I could go the long-winded version and talk to you about things that happened when I was a kid, like my dad taking me to see different properties and talking to me about leverage and getting tenants to pay your mortgage. Oh, I remember I was a bank teller in high school, and there was this one woman who kept coming in on an irregular basis, deposit massive checks, $26,000, $19,000, $34,000. And I finally got the courage one day. I said, "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but do you mind telling me what you do for a living?" She said she was a real estate broker. I'm like, okay, ding, ding, ding. This sounds interesting. She's crushing it. I want to be her. And and then it was fast forward to my senior year in college, and one of the commercial brokerage firms from Chicago came to campus at WashU in St. Louis, and they started taking me through the questions of, you're going to be working with CEOs, owners, presidents of companies. I thought, well, that's a good network to have, regardless of what you're doing. They said, you're going to earn commission. You're going to be negotiating deals valued in the millions of dollars, earning giant commissions. I'm like, well, that sounds really fun. I like the idea of that. They said to me, "We don't care when you come and go, just that you're producing." The kid that I was my whole life really lent to that, where I'm like, look, I'm not going to be a corporate ladder climber. I'm not going to be kissing the butt ahead of me to get ahead. I will work hard and I will do well. And that's how I should be judged, is how, on my performance. So I said, okay, that sounds good. And then, Joe, they planted the hook and they said, by the way, you'll probably fail at this.
Yeah.
And what they wanted was young, hungry kids that wanted to prove somebody wrong, that had a chip on their shoulder, that said, no one's going to tell me what I can and can't do or whether I'm going to fail or not. And I was exactly what they wanted. Again, fast forward to 26 years later, I think they were right. They got the right guy.
So, share a little bit about your role today and how it fits into the picture of what Tenant Advisory Group is about.
Absolutely. So I've got an internal role and an external role. Internally, my job is to hire the right people, put the right people in the right seats, and give them the tools and the processes they need to be successful. Very simple. That's my internal role. External role, my job is to meet business owners, C-level executives, and decision makers of companies that occupy commercial real estate and bring them value so as to build trust. So when they have a commercial real estate transactional need, whether it's to buy, to sell, to lease, to do a sale lease back, they think of me. And I can then bring them in and hand them off to the team that I've hand selected and given them, like I said, the tools and the processes to do what they do best. And that's broker an exceptional result for those clients.
Okay, so you spent over 20 years representing these tenants and buyers, but what's changed the most in how you think about leverage in these negotiations today versus early in your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, when I was younger, I would just be so happy to get a client and I would want to just take off running like most of my competitors. When they get a client, they just shoot off running. Let's do this. Let's execute. Let's get it done. Let's get paid. Let's move on to the next one. That's their motto. What I've learned over the years is to slow down, understand more about the client's business overall. What are they trying to achieve in the long run? It's not just about, oh, you think you need 10,000 square feet of office space? Great. let's go find 10,000 feet of office space and get this deal done. Because oftentimes they don't need 10,000 square feet now. What they need is 7,500 square feet now with the ability to expand it to 10,000 square feet if they meet their growth plans and objectives. Well, my competitors are going to just put them into the 10,000 feet. And day one, the client's going to occupy 7,500 feet. Maybe they get to the 10,000, maybe they don't. But either way, they're paying for square footage they don't need. I know that if I can keep as much money as possible back in their pockets, that will fuel the growth of their business and give them a better opportunity to get to that 10,000, the 12, the 15. And so really what I've done a lot differently than in the beginning is to take the time to learn more about the business as a whole. What are their plans? What are their growth plans? What do they want to see in the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years? And how can we build a real estate plan that accommodates that rather than getting them the real estate for what their goal is going to be and hopefully they grow into it. And so it's just kind of being a little bit more strategic about things. We're certainly trying to get a lot more growth rights and flexibility rights, contraction rights to terminate than I was when I was younger. And you can see this almost in any lease that I look at that's been done by a larger firm. Number one, they rarely have a right to terminate, which is a great piece of leverage for a tenant, even if they don't want to leave the property. Number two, I would say 99% of the time, the right to renew is at the then market rates. That doesn't
Hmm.
really do anything for a tenant. All that does is allow them to negotiate just like they were going to have that right anyway. And
Right.
so what we try to do, even though it takes a little more time, a little more effort, is we say, my client would like the right to renew at the then escalated rental rate of the lease. So what we've done then, Joe, is we've capped the rate at which the rate can escalate to. But as a tenant, we can always negotiate that lower. If market has gone below that, we can say, we really would like to exercise our right to renew, but not at that rate. We'll exercise our right to renew at $3 a foot lower than that rate, and we'll get a deal done. But the landlord can never say, if we've stipulated the rate, hey, Bill, the market's now gone way above that. We want them to renew, but at this rate. We
Hmm.
can't do that. So it's just a thing that other brokers that are lazy and trying to get paid and move on versus what I've learned to take my time, understand what's in the client's best interest, and work hard to implement that.
Well, that's great. That really took over. What my follow up question is what happens behind the scenes to consistently create that level of leverage. So thank you for that clarity on that.
Absolutely.
Across all the deals that you've worked on, where do you see tenants and buyers consistently leaving money on the table without even
Oh,
realizing it?
beautiful question. There's two places. Number one, it's attorneys. Attorneys are there to minimize risk. Brokers are there to minimize costs. I oftentimes see tenants leaning on their attorneys to negotiate business terms. That is out of their lane. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In general, attorneys are very smart and they bring value to these negotiations. You do not want your attorney negotiating business terms because that's not what they're there to do. They're there to minimize risk. The second side, where a huge amount of value is left on the table, is when a owner is selling their business. The business broker, right? The M&A advisor, the attorney will say, sell your real estate along with the business. False. That is a wrong decision 95% of the time. What you need to do is go to a broker, have them value that real estate, not a real estate appraiser. Appraisers use very different methods. In real estate, when commercial real estate is bought and sold, we use the income approach. The value for the property will be determined based upon the income it generates. So when you sell your property along with the business, you are essentially leaving a long-term lease and the value that brings on the table, right? You're leaving it off the table, excuse me. So what I tell sellers, if I get to talk to them before they execute the sale of their business, is execute a sale leaseback on your property first. You will drastically increase the value you get for the property and then sell your business. On the flip side, Joe, if you're a buyer, I advise my buyers, I'll say, look, I will provide the due diligence. I'll tell you what this building is worth, that they're valuing it as if it's empty. And then once you purchase the business along with the real estate, we will then do a sale leaseback and significantly increase the value that real estate has because we're putting a 10-year lease attached to it. And so that, in my mind, is the biggest way buyers and sellers are leaving value on the table right there, is selling the real estate along with the business.
Well, and follow up to that is when you're dealing with these landlords, sellers, brokers, attorneys, all with competing incentives, where do negotiations typically break down, even when both sides think they may have reasonable measures?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, Joe. I mean, if I can talk to the client, um, I'm just going to share with them the facts and go, here's the value of this building that the seller is valuating it. And this is what the value is going to be to an investor buying this and you completing a sale lease back. Oftentimes, what I have found, this has just been my experience, attorneys have very large egos in general, right? They want to be right. They want to win. And it's not always the right thing for their client. A lot of times a deal breaks down because an attorney looks at an issue as white or black,
Hmm.
red or like right or wrong. Like we either do it or we don't. And if I can get the opportunity to chime in, I ask two questions and I want the client to be on the call with the attorney. I say, Mr. Attorney or Mrs., how often do you see this clause come into play? And more often than not, they say, well, not that often, but if it did, like, okay, say fine. Let's say it did. What is the cost to remedy? That is how you rationally look at different legal issues that you're negotiating is you say, how often does this actually come into play and what is the cost to remedy? And if it's not that often and a low cost to remedy, move on. Stop negotiating it. It doesn't matter. We're trying to get a deal done, not for the attorney to win every point. So if I can get an attorney on the call with their client, then usually we end up getting through a lot of red tape because attorneys like to battle. They like to win. Their ego typically drives things. And I'm only saying this based upon 26 years of experience. And if I could name any one single factor that has led to the death of the majority of my deals, it'd be attorneys. There was a philosopher named Carl Jung who used to talk about ego and how we spend the first half of our life trying to build up a healthy ego. And the second half of our life, the enlightened ones of us try to dismantle our ego and become normal, enlightened people. Attorneys don't typically get to that second half. They
Right.
want to fight, they want to win, they want to battle. And I know there's some attorneys that aren't like that, right? I've worked with them before. And those are the ones that I keep referring to my clients. It's the ones I had a guy, I know I'm getting on a tangent here. I had an attorney once saying, this is a real estate attorney. So they're looking at leases all the time. He says to the client on a call, this is the worst lease I've ever read in my life. Maybe that was so. All right. But my response to that was, well, let's go through it. That may be the case, but here's, most of the clauses, it was, okay, well, maybe if you're representing an anchor tenant taking 400,000 square feet, this would be a clause you could renegotiate. This client's taking 4,000 square feet. They're representing 0.6% of the building. What do you think their leverage is? To go to another building? The same thing is going to happen over there. So just talking through it and being rational and understanding where your leverage is and where it's not. I mean, this attorney thought he was representing GE or Google. And I'm like, no, it's 0.6% of the building. Landlord can do without this tenant, you know? And yes, not everything is going to be in the tenant's favor, but what we really need to understand is how likely is something to happen? What's the cost to remedy? Issues are not black and white. Here's a big one attorneys lose their marbles over is a landlord's right to relocate a tenant. Now, it's very easily solvable. But the attorney is going to go, no, they can't move our tenant. That's the space we want. I said, well, hold on a sec. If we put certain parameters around that clause, like, fine, you can relocate us, but you need to give us a certain amount of notice. You have to move us to a higher or equal floor. You have to give us equal or better views, and you got to pay for it. The landlord's going to agree to it, but it's going to cost them a tremendous amount of money to actually relocate the tenant. So, A, it very rarely happens. And B, if it does happen, the tenant's going to get a higher or better floor with an equal or better view, and they're going to get everything paid for it. Who cares? You're getting it
A
better.
win-win.
And so
Yeah.
that's the easy solution. But an attorney is going to go, no, you can't relocate my tenant. We will not stand for that. Come on, think of the gray areas. You're an attorney. You're supposed to come up with solutions. Saying no is not a solution. And that's where I think a lot of attorneys fall short is just saying no. Here's another great example I had just recently. I had an attorney saying, we want to be able to review the tenant's financials every month. And the tenant said, absolutely not. We've already agreed to once every 6 months. So each attorney was saying, no, we won't agree to yours. We won't agree to yours. And I said, landlord, why would you like to see the financials every month? And they said, because this tenant hasn't showed profitability in 13 years. So we want to know that if things take a significant turn for the worse, we want to be able to get ahead of it and in trying to release the space. I said, great, tenant, why do you not want to show your financials every month? Aren't you preparing financials already? Yes, we are, but we don't want the landlord to use our financials to kick us out of the lease. I said, that's great. Now we understand what each side wants. I said, tenant, guess what? Landlord cannot kick you out of the lease unless you default. So if you stop paying, no matter how bad your financials are, if you stop paying rent or unless you stop paying rent, you're not in default. And I said, landlord's tenant is worried that if you see extremely poor financials, that you're going to have reason to kick them out. They said, we can't kick them out unless they're in default. I said, great. Then can we just put in a redundant sentence that says, unless they're in default, landlord cannot kick out the tenant? Boom, problem solved. So easy, no ego involved. And it was just about talking through it, listening. What's going on? What is your concern? Why do you want this? And whereas attorneys in general are just like, we can't do this. The answer is no. Yes, but we need it. So if you can't do it, then we're not going to do this deal. It's just silly stuff where ego is getting in the way. These two attorneys never took the time to say, why is it you would like that? Because my client's concern is that you're going to use our financials to get rid of us as a tenant. No, we can't get rid of you as a tenant unless you're in default. I mean, that's my experience. It's like herding kittens, it's like managing children sometimes. Anyway, I know I've digressed a huge amount.
No,
For
you're
that, I
good.
apologize.
Oh, you're good. You're good. You clearly have a strong presence and knowledge base. You've got strong network and definite negotiating edge. So, what becomes the bottleneck for you at scale? Is it deal flow, time,
Great
execution, or
question.
something else?
No, it's easy. Right now, I've got two wonderful brokers on my team. Four if you count my wife and I, but we don't really broker a ton of transactions. So I've got two great brokers. Most of my other transactions, I'm referring out. I'm referring to other brokers because we don't have the bandwidth to do them in house. So I find the one that's got the right skill set in the right market and say, this is the broker you should be working with. That should be leading point on this. And so really the biggest bottleneck for me right now to executing more transactions within Tenant Advisory Group is more brokers. I think the challenge there has been I haven't taken the necessary steps to meet with these brokers. And oftentimes when I do met with, they might be at CB Richard Ellis, Jones Lincoln LaSalle, some of the bigger firms. And they go, well, why would I go to a small firm like Tenant Advisory Group when I'm at a big firm like CB Richard Ellis? And I say, I don't know, because you want to make more money. But, there's comfort in numbers, right? And so when people look around the office and they see an entire floor or multiple floors of people at a firm, they think safety, they think security. But when I think of safety and security, I think of a large bank account, right? Money in your account. I don't care how many people are around, but if I've got deals to work on and somebody, most of these firms, they're not giving their brokers deals, telling the broker go out and find deals. But I've got more opportunities than I have time to work on them. Same thing with my other brokers. And so, it's just a matter of getting in front of these brokers to explain to them, this is what we're doing. This is what's going on. Are you interested in doing more deals and making more money, getting a better split? It's easy for me to offer that because I don't have all the overhead that these other firms have. So literally, I can literally offer brokers more money for the deals they bring in. Uh, but they just think, well, you're a small firm. That would be silly for me to go there.
Well, when you're talking about more brokers, and for the listeners that may be in the local area, how many brokers are you looking that
I
would help?
bet you I could keep another 3 to 4 brokers pretty busy.
Okay. Okay. And when you're advising the brokers or even we'll go even further into the clients too, what are the key signals or variables that you're weighing that most people overlook?
Wow, that's a great question. One thing that I think residential brokers have figured out that commercial brokers haven't is this thing called pre-qualification. Do you have the money to buy what you say you want to buy? A lot of times what brokers will do is they get an interested party. They get a business owner that says, we're growing, we need more space. And they go, let's go. Let's go find it. Let's negotiate the deal. And then it gets to the 1 yard line and the tenant says, wait, it's going to be how much money per month? You have to put up how much of a security deposit? No, 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 we can't afford that. They just wasted a tremendous amount of time. So I think it's kind of taking a page out of the residential broker's playbook and pre-qualifying. Taking the
Mhm.
time when someone shows interest, great. Let's not be off to the races just yet. Like I had a website lead earlier this week. Guy wanted 20,000 feet of retail space. I don't do a ton of retail, but I'll do 20,000 feet any day of the week. Instead of just saying, great, let's go, let's do this. I said, is this a new business or a second location or an existing? What is it? New business. Okay. When you hear new business, that's really the first kind of not red flag, but the first sign that we got to slow things down. I'll say, do you have a business plan and a budget? Like, do you know how much it's going to cost to get things started? You do. Great. Do you have the money for that? You have some investors, but not all. Okay. Well, maybe I can introduce you to a banker that can help you get an SBA loan and help you get that money. But it's not, a lot of people think step one of starting a business is go find space. And it's not. It's go find money. You need money to start these businesses. And no landlord is going to do a deal with a tenant that doesn't have money, right? They're not going to sign you up for a lease to rent space where they know you can't afford the rent. So I like to start with show me the money. Do you
Right.
have it? And if you don't, then I'm going to help you try and get it. I'm going to introduce you to resources that can get you that money, but we're not going to go out, start looking for space, touring, negotiating, sending proposals and negotiating. We're not going to do that yet. We're going to not put the cart before the horse and just make sure that they're doing the proper steps so that when they are ready to get space, then we're prepared to help them get it over the finish line.
Yeah, that's great information. So, with how commercial real estate has shifted, remote work, hybrid models, changing demand, what are you seeing most people are misreading right now?
Great question. I've been saying for years and years, the single person who's got the largest influence on commercial real estate has been Jerome Powell, the Fed chair. And who's the guy that's going to be confirmed? Walsh or Warsh or something? It's going to be him. And it's about interest rates. And the reason is interest rates have a large factor on the level of employment. When employees have the leverage, like right after COVID, everybody was binge hiring people and building up their benches, which means all the employees had the leverage of if you required them to come back into the office, they would say, boss, I got 3 job offers waiting on me for remote work opportunities. And if you make me come in, I will quit and go take one of these others. Well, that's the biggest dynamics that shifted is in the labor market. It's not as hot of a labor market anymore. Those employees they don't even have one job waiting for them. They have none. And when you as a business owner see companies like JP Morgan Chase, AT&T, Amazon, the federal government, even Zoom requiring their people to come back full time or at least 3 days a week, it makes it a lot more palatable for a business owner to think, you know what, I can do that too. And they don't have a list of companies that they can go work for. So really that's been the kind of the biggest change and what's going to affect the space needs going forward. I think we've really leveled out. We've kind of seen the bottom in terms of vacancy rates. And then there's such markets like New York. They've already rebounded to pre-pandemic levels. We've seen markets like Miami, Houston, Dallas, Nashville. They've exceeded their pre-pandemic levels of vacancy. Those are still very robust markets, but there's a lot of markets like Chicago, San Francisco, Denver, Detroit, Kansas City, LA. They're still below their pre-pandemic levels, but I don't think they're getting much softer. We kind of hit the bottom and we're coming back because the labor market has softened. And when the labor market softens, those employees, they don't want to jump ship when they're asked to come back in. They're going to say, well, that sucks. I now have to go back to a commute, but I also would rather have my job and
Right.
keep the commute. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now in the office market.
Well, with it bottoming out and looking ahead, maybe the next 12, maybe 24 months, where are you placing your biggest bets in terms of how tenants and buyers should approach real estate decisions?
If you're asking me where I'm investing, I've always had a similar hierarchy. I like actually multifamily residential in class B properties and in secondary markets, not prime markets. I've always liked multi-tenant industrial and I've always liked medical. Well, one asset class that I've never liked, unless you can get it on the right buy with the right long-term tenant, is office space. But if you're asking me about I do see that office vacancy rates have leveled off and are going to continue to reduce and
Mhm.
go back down, but we're still at record levels. Like in Chicago, we're at, depending on whose numbers you're looking at, 26 to 28% vacancy rates, which is pretty high. At the pandemic, we were at about 12%. So we've got a long way to go to get back to pre-pandemic levels, but I really see more and more businesses, they've always recognized the value of having their people together. There's so many things that happen better, more efficiently with people together, like collaboration, mentorship, learning from senior folks, team building. There's so many different things that sharing of ideas, whatever it is. There's a lot of things that business owners and leaders recognize is better having your people together than having them remote. And that's what probably most of the office calls I'm getting, calls for office users are, we've been remote. We want to come back to the office. Some of them are going to make their people, some of them aren't, but it's like we want to have a place where our people can go. And by the way, there's a lot of studies have been done about how, especially if you're a younger worker and you're looking to climb the corporate ladder and get promotions, the folks that get more often get promoted than not are the ones that are there and present and
Hmm.
see the people on a daily basis and have relationships with their bosses. So, if you're a younger worker, I would be telling my bosses that I want to get back into the office. And if you don't have one, can we get one? And if we have one, I would start going there more regularly because it really is about the see and be seen and the building of relationships. That's going to be very important to learning and growing and getting those promotions going forward.
Okay. So at your level, what are you personally focusing on to improve right now? Not your business, you.
Wow. Well, that's a good question. I think it is a lot about self-improvement and trying to be a better husband, a better father, a better boss. And I think a lot of that comes into play with trying to eat better, get your sleep, get as much sleep as I can and being present. This is this is a huge virus for our society. I know that when my kids see me on that, they take it as the phone is more important than them. So I think a big thing I'm working on is when I'm with my kids to not have this with
Okay.
me.
Well, part of that you said be a better boss too. So if you could remove one major friction point in your business, something that would unlock more deals or better outcomes or more time for your family, what would that be?
I think there's two things. Number one is whenever we meet somebody, we look up their connections on LinkedIn and who of those connections are C-level executives of businesses that occupy commercial space. And then after we've brought them some value or done something to help them, and we will ask for introductions. Well, if I give somebody 10 names, they're probably going to know two or three of them well enough to make an introduction. It's those other seven names that we didn't get an introduction to that we spend a lot of time and effort on figuring out whether we're asking other people, other mutual connections for introductions to those people, whether it's trying to connect to them directly. That's a big time spend on potential leads. And then the other on the deal side is what I'm noticing lately is that, especially with our smaller clients, our brokers do a great job listening to their needs, finding them the right space, leading the negotiations, doing all the things. And then up until the very end, when, that's what I'm kind of getting feedback is, well, I didn't know we had to pay for our own phone and data cabling, or I didn't know that the free rent started when we signed the lease, or whatever it is. So I imagine there's probably something along in the process that would be very easy to just send the client a note or something that's saying, hey, key things to be aware of, when signing a lease, or things to note when getting into a new space, whatever. Something that I think could alleviate a lot of those frustrations and pain points that have been expressed lately by some of our clients.
If any one of my listeners or anyone that sees this wants to get in touch with you or know more about you, where's the best place for them to go?
Absolutely. And it's our website where they contact us. Those emails go to my inbox and I respond to them pretty much right away. And so our website is www.tagcommercialbroker.com. That's TAG commercialbroker.com. There's contact us links all over the website. And those emails come into my inbox and I respond to them.
Bill, this was a strong conversation. I really appreciate you just not just sharing what's happening in commercial real estate, but also how you're thinking about it around negotiation leverages and dealing with legal and where the deals break down. There's a lot of noise in this space. And I think you brought some real clarity with some of the questions that I asked today. So, for anyone listening, if you're making a decision around leasing, purchasing, or just trying to understand how to create leverage in your next deal, this is the kind of perspective you need in your corner. Bill, I appreciate you coming and sharing this today.
My pleasure, Joe. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.